we've seen through the last bull cycle, visual artists getting their portion of attention, musicians getting their portion of attention, and then even though there's been quite a few projects that launched in the text format, I think the traditional media industry still hasn't been exploring the blockchain, in a sufficient way. It's not that easy to make people change their habits and just explain them new concepts, even that those concepts can be contagious. In the early days, there was, I would say, some naive optimism about how Web3 and blockchain can change the current state of things without understanding that human psychology is one of the constant things that can be changed.
Hey everyone, welcome to another insightful episode of NEWFORUM with a very special guest, Yana Sosnovskaya. Yana is a New York-based cultural entrepreneur, brand strategist, and visual storyteller providing consultancy across all platforms for cultural, lifestyle, and Web3 brands. Yana is currently building Zine at Zora, and she's also quite involved in mental health advocacy. We're super curious to hear about Yana's learnings, insights about the potential of Web3 media, and why she is building Zine. Yana, welcome to NEWFORUM.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Exciting. You have quite an impressive portfolio. You worked as a creative director, brand strategist, and the list goes on for brands press such as Dazed, WWD, Metal Magazine, and the list goes on. And I'm just curious to know what's the experience been like working with all these brands, and how did it all lead you to Web3?
Yeah, so I think most of my life I spent in different outlets of culture building, and it was everything from the theater up to fashion. I actually co-founded a fashion brand and a digital media platform when I used to live in LA, and everything that I was doing, I was mostly interested in, exploring how cultural trends are being formed and how they are affecting the rest of the industries and the society at large. So I think that just kind of how I, ended up with my brand just being exposed to certain media. But it was with my brand specifically pre-Web3, it's very kind of, analog, especially tangible good as fashion. We were interested in exploring what was that we called it like a new femininity. And one of the core ideas of the brand was that, first of all, still, it was 2017, 2018, women maybe were not still very much, especially in the United States, embracing the different aspect of femininity, sexuality through fashion. And my core message was like, you can wear an oversized shirt, you can wear a massive jumpsuit and still feel very much like yourself and be cool, fashion forward and progressive thinking women and feel confident. And then another aspect was about that is that we're looking at the silhouettes of fashion at unisex silhouettes. And despite the silhouettes being called unisex, they're actually all taken from the menswear. And especially during the time of, Me Too, it felt very unfair. And we're exploring how traditional quote unquote feminine silhouettes can be adopted by all genders and role expression of femininity, sexuality. With the brand and marketing, I think, honestly, a lot of my peers that I'm talking to who are creatives, I think that's kind of their hack into working with, larger brands and that's one of the actually issues that Web3 is solving, that if you are a creative, probably the only way how you can adjust and adapt yourself is start working with a brand. And that's like the most quote unquote creative outlet.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a natural evolution for you because of your passions. And it looks like, you definitely, would you say, this is like a really odd question, but like you definitely have a passion for, is it like equality or in a way, like It's kind of I kind of hear a lot about that inclusion, diversity as you speak, and I feel like it's only natural that you kind of have yourself in this space, because that's sort of like the natural evolution if we want to move away from Web 2, right? And some of the struggles from there.
Yeah, I was thinking that honestly, that I think that was very much what attracted me in the Web3, because my partner started working with Web3 a little bit earlier than I did, before the whole like media hype happened. And he knowing me and my interest, he was pointing and saying like, hey, I think there's something very special about this group of people and community. Well, it was still very much niche, and it felt very much like a subculture, even that this, I'm trying not to use this term, it's very much overused right now. And it's not exactly, the subculture in its kind of, term, but it did feel like people were aligned specifically just because of the value set. And this value set was very much interesting for me. So I reached out to a few companies, and Zora was one of them. And Zora got back to me like immediately, and we just clicked and hit it off with the founding team, with Dee and Jacob. We just had like a couple of conversations, and I think within a week I was already joining the team. It was happening very fast, and since then, yeah, it was quite a journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. So since you kind of already touched a bit about Zine, what you're building at Zora, I'm curious to hear a bit more about the project, because when we speak about Zora, people immediately think about NFT marketplace. And with Zine, that's the media arm. So what's kind of like the connection between the two? Is it like a natural evolution of Zora? What's the impact you want to make in this space and for creators? And I think the last part would be like, what are some of the learnings and experiences building Zine so far?
That's a great question. It's a very loaded question. So
It is.
I'll probably break it into the parts.
Yeah.
So the first one, just kind of alleviating miscommunication, that Zora has launched like a few years ago as a marketplace. Since then, it has pivoted into being a protocol. It's not like a marketplace, right, in its core function, and is currently focused right now on building tools both for builders and engineers, but also the tools, no code tools for people who are not tech savvy, maybe like artists, or actually, people who are interested in creating DAOs. We're very much heavily focused right now on supporting the DAO infrastructure. But the core goal of Zora is to build the public infrastructure on chain. Just, all the media that you can think of, we strongly believe, it will benefit from bringing it on the blockchain for various reasons that we can also talk about. But just to make it, quick and concise, the Zora Zine I launched it in August 2021. And initially we're just thinking about, and we didn't really think it through. We wanted just to have an editorial project, just because there were like multiple kind of verticals within Zora. Someone worked with visual artists, someone worked with music NFTs, and we just wanted to kind of, on one hand, start working with writers. On another hand, it was honestly like a sweet spot and a niche untaken. And still to this day, I don't see anyone else working with the intersection of Web3 and cutting edge culture, because there are some other great outlets, but they just doing different type of, media work. So for the zine, we just wanted to make sure that we'll cover the yet to be discovered projects, builders and creators, and also topics that maybe people have the conversations like you and me are having right now, but they're not always like putting them, publicly, about decentralized, for example, personal identity, or other like decentralized currencies that are not on a blockchain yet, but they were predecessors of, Bitcoin and Ethereum, like M-Pesa, for example, one of like my favorite pieces lately that we've done. In terms of, the future goals and how we kind of see the evolution of the project, because we would definitely, me having some media background and the whole team who works at the zine, these people have media background in cultural journalism. So we actually are not Web3 natives, as like a lot of people who, come and say like, hey, I've been like, working with ethereum since like 2014. We're not. We just adopted it in the last 2 years. So the majority of our background lies in the cultural journalism. And it's very kind of interesting to see the merge of two worlds and how we can influence that and bring that expertise into Web3 media world. The project right now, and for the past, maybe 6 months or so, we've kind of been trying to make sure that whatever we do at the Zine, we always try to preserve the journalistic integrity. And even if there is some sort of a conflict of interest, we're striving to kind of, first of all, be transparent about that to our readership. And second, just, alleviate any sort of like miscommunication. So we very often source and use like our team as just the source of inspiration. And because the amount of collective knowledge that our team has about certain projects and certain people, which is like it's a massive advantage that we're definitely taking. And sometimes we're just like coming to the engineer channels and disrupting their very serious conversations, and we're like, hey guys, dumb question, does anyone know a great person to do this feature? And then like they help us. But we're really trying to make sure that we're not just a company blog, and we're serving the media purpose. And if you're curious, if you're interested to talk about some plans, because we do have quite an exciting year ahead of us, we're happy to talk about
it. It would be really nice for our community to, and also people just listening, to hear what they could expect from Zine.
Yeah, so I think because obviously what we've been seeing in the past decade or so, what was going on with media and journalism, and how people started just lacking trust in the institutions for different reasons. Because they're centralized, because a lot of journalists maybe are not following the traditional journalistic path, and they're not thinking about traditional journalistic values, and because the mass media and like social media as well, and how easily and quickly you can just put your opinion up there. So we're thinking about a few kind of steps and a few maybe blocks of evolution of the Zine. One of the first ideas, which is obviously very obvious, we're going to be putting everything, we're already started putting all the content on chain for, once again, a few reasons. I think first is an additional source of monetization for the content creators, for the writers, photographers, whoever it is. The second part is that it's a new model, revenue model, and ability to monetize and crowdfund for the media. Because right now, like if you look, there are basically two models. It's either paywall in the media or the advertisement. We're doing none. Our content is always going to be open and free, and we're not doing any paid partnerships as right now on purpose as well. We just want to make sure that we cover only the projects that we're truly really interested. However, there should be a different type of monetization, because that actually leads me to the second part. We are building the treasury because we're going to be launching a DAO. Right now, it's going to be just focused on the cultural journalism, and we're going to be utilizing the Nouns model, if you're familiar with that, which is, the Nouns is a project, I think they started a little bit more than a year ago, and they initially were they just mint one NFT per day, and it's a generative art, which being everything's on chain. It just generates automatically, and they mint one per day. So if someone is buying this, every 10th goes automatically into the treasury. And then all the funds that are generated from the sale, they actually automatically go into the treasury of the DAO. NFT that people are buying, that's the membership that gives them the governance power. And from the DAO there, you can create proposals and distribute the treasury amongst other projects. So Nouns actually created the new model for redistribution of the funds amongst other projects. And that's just the model that they're currently using specifically for the Nouns brand, but it can be utilized honestly for anything, any creative project, any non-creative, anything. And we're very much interested in just like experimenting with the same model for the Zine DAO and seeing how many actually media interested people out there in the Web3 writers who would like to participate in, creative proposals. And right now maybe it's going to be writers, but later it can be any other form. And right now we're going to be just focusing on the cultural journalism. But if experiment would be proven successful, I think this model has a lot of potential for even traditional media, and even seeing, how writers and contributors currently in the media world are heavily underpaid. It would be very interesting to see if this experiment will be proven successful.
I was also thinking that what would you say is the one big advantage that Web3 media has over the traditional, how it's been, I mean, the way we've known it in Web2? What would you say is that one clear distinction between the two?
I think that probably it's not there yet. We're yet to kind of collectively build it, because I know there are some other great projects that are tackling the same challenge. But the potential is that creating the decentralized media, ideally, and if there's a decentralized platform that actually allows people to create materials and create proposals through governance and voting, and you know that it's not owned by anyone, because obviously, right now, if you look at any media, it is opinionated. If you want it or not, it is still opinionated. And I think, this, no one knows how this experiment can go, but I think it's worth trying, because right now we do have a curatorial aspect. There's an editorial team, who does their curatorial and editorial type of work. But if you do create a decentralized media platform, that's completely out of your hand. And like, as a society, it can go multiple ways. It can go great, it can go not so great, but I think it is definitely worth trying and providing people with that opportunity. And then it's just like, it's out of your hands, and then people can actually decide how it can go. That's one thing. And the second thing, which I don't think we're there yet technology-wise, however, I do believe that within a few years we will be there, is the more traditional kind of archival system. Once you put text on a blockchain, like what right now, for example, music NFTs are exploring, if it's getting into the mix or someone's reusing it and the original track artist gets their royalties, I think it would be great to see the same usage for the same utility for the media and writers. It doesn't always have to be, just like a payment or a financial aspect of it. It just can be the matter of attribution, and that you can always kind of track and see where the original text and code came from.
That's a very insightful point. Thanks for sharing that. Speaking about reward and incentives, it sounds like Zine is well curated, right? In terms of the content and all of that. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you reward contributions, and how do you go about it? Do you have a model for it at the moment?
Yes, currently we just have a pretty traditional model in terms of that we have a rate, and it's not an ideal model. We offer very competitive rates comparing to traditional media, but the rate itself, the model itself, is not ideal. It's pretty much broken, because we offer a rate per word, and people who do work in the media industry, they understand that it brings a lot of challenges for the writers, because then writers are not liberated from actually focusing on the work. They're focusing on the amount of words in order to monetize it in the best way. So it's very limiting. But we're switching into in addition to what we're doing right now, we're switching into putting all the work on chain, and then seeing how people are going to be actually taking that, and if there is going to be an interest in purchasing, minting NFTs. We're going to be minting articles as editions. It's going to be very accessible. It's nothing crazy, probably less than a cup of coffee. And then we're going to explore about how you can, what the utility you can actually use, and how you can review the articles that you've minted. Right now, I am talking to a few wallet companies and kind of exploring what their thinking process is, because just even currently wallets are very much heavily focused on the visual media, because even the music NFTs are suffering that it's not the perfect, unfortunately, experience, and it's just focused on the visual media. So even if you mint an article, even if we are able to mint it in the beautiful UI, it's not going to show up in the wallet the way you would like it. People are not going to be actually read it from the wallet. So we're trying to right now find the way around that, so people have like a nice experience.
I think the thing about Web3 projects is that it keeps evolving and it keeps getting better and better. So so if, let's say, someone is listening to you and they're thinking, oh, wow, I really love this and I want to collaborate somehow, or contribute, how do they go about that?
Yeah, so we have pitch submission form that's open to anyone, and I think we can just link it later to the video and share with people. So you can just submit this form. It has certain rules, because I just want to make sure that people actually understand how the pitches work, and spend maybe a little bit extra time into thinking and the structuring their pitch. And we're looking at all of them, and once we find something interesting, we immediately reach out to people and offer them collaboration. But we're very much open and constantly looking for writers and people who are maybe yet to be discovered, but who are taking writing very seriously.
I love that. That sounds wonderful. On January 4th, you posted a quote, you tweeted a quote, and it says, "Human nature doesn't change. You're wasting your time if you're trying to change how people behave. But if you change their tools, you can change whatever you want," by Stewart Brand. And I'm curious to know what was going through your mind in that moment when you tweeted that.
I was watching a documentary about Stewart Brand that was actually, I think, one of the first documentaries that the creators put on chain, and you were able to watch it only if you minted the pass. But then they thankfully outsourced, open sourced it, and allowed people to, just anyone to watch it. Because once again, as I said, I believe the content should be accessible and free. Yeah, I think it was a very interesting kind of quote from Stewart Brand specifically, because I'm sure your listeners know who he is and just what type of projects he built and what he's doing right now with the Long Now Foundation. So I think it's interesting, especially with the Web3, seeing that in the early days there was maybe, I would say, some naive optimism about how Web3 and blockchain can change the current state of things, without understanding that human psychology is one of the constant things that can be changed. And through the latest bull cycle, I think a lot of, even like, me myself, I was realizing that it's not that easy to make people change their habits and just explain them new concepts, even that those concepts can be contagious. People, if they even align with those concepts, they're not going to just shape their behaviors. Because the amount of conversations that I had within people in my kind of cultural circles, brilliant people, amazing thinkers who are yet to get into the Web3. Yeah, I can see that they're picking up the concepts, but there is like a very big resistance towards just going through, UX, UI, and how complicated things. And we all know that, right, that they're not ideal and they're not perfect. So I think expecting that people are going to switch purely because of the value set is naive, and would rather shape and create the tools that people understand immediately what's the benefit of using these tools for themselves right now. And that's how you can shape their behaviors. But through conversations, unfortunately, it's not going to be changed.
That's a really interesting concept. And it also gets me thinking about like your passion for mental health, like are there any projects, or is there anything, or is there any aspect of that with Zine, even since it's something you're passionate about, you incorporating that as you build Zine?
Yeah, so I think I just like a lot of people, I have my personal journey with mental health. I have two diagnoses, and this is how I had to learn about the importance of mental health and understanding that mental health is probably the most important thing that we as human beings have, and that's something that we can't afford to lose. I am just doing a lot of kind of public speaking and advocacy work, and I am actually considering doing one personal project with my friend about mental health, specifically in Web3, just because through the cycles we've seen all sorts of various behaviors and how people are not following the mental health hygiene, and there's a burnout. And sometimes, people are not understanding how, and I'm very much guilty of it myself, how we're getting into some sort of like manic phases. And then just because it's so exciting, there's so many things happening. I was literally looking yesterday at my calendar and then my calendar a year ago at the same date, and there was a massive difference. And I was like, that's insane how we just went through the full cycle when you have like 12 hours of calls every day, because you want to say yes to everything exciting. But with the mental health, yeah, I'm just like kind of openly speaking, and I'm not a professional. So I'm always, whenever I'm publicly speaking or doing any sort of projects, I'm always bringing with me mental health professionals, different type of professionals, therapists, psychiatrists, or people who are, working maybe with specific diagnosis and specific challenges, because it's always interesting to kind of bring in their perspective. And my main goal is to destigmatize conversations about mental health. Still, there is a lot of stigma. I'm myself, for example, coming, from the very conservative culture and country, and I know how challenging it can be if everyone around you tells you that you're actually okay, you're making it up, and just, don't be lazy, or just, be optimistic. And unfortunately, it's not the way how it works. You will not, for example, say anyone else who has maybe a diabetes that they are just making it up and that they should, get back on their feet and be optimistic about that. So that's the same thing with mental health. And it's just my goal is just to spread awareness and to destigmatize these conversations. And even if one person will benefit from this, I'm going to be beyond happy. If one person will reach out to a mental health professional and start the conversation about their mental health and get some professional help, that means my goal is achieved.
Amazing. I love that. I think it's such an important topic that we don't really do that much justice to. We're focused on just doing and innovating and achieving, and we don't take time to take care of the mind, right? And even the body. So I think it's good, even though we think it's common knowledge, it really isn't. It would take somebody to listen to you speak and go like, yeah, my calendar is overly booked, I need to take a break. So this is good, and I'm glad that you're also doing that work. That's great. And so I have this question. Do you think that Web3 is accessible, inclusive? What do you think?
It's a great question. No, I don't think it's accessible yet. I think that there are two levels of inaccessibility. One is that everyone, when they're joining or coming to Web3, they see and understand that's UX and UI, as we touched earlier. It does require some persistence from people who are getting onboarded into actually, sitting in and putting some time and effort in understanding. And then probably people are going to go through the round of scams and their wallet drained, and no one's immune from that. So there is that aspect, is UX and UI. And then there is the second aspect that I'm very often thinking about, that only people from developed countries and the first world countries are actually capable of affording all those experiments, especially when the gas is so high. And just, do something, put like, I don't know, $10, even 50, sometimes it's 100, which is insane, just to experiment with a blockchain, and you're not sure if it's going to bring you any benefit or not. So of course, right now it's extremely privileged. And that's why I am interested in exploring and just going forward. There are probably going to be a few later in the year projects in the Zine where some of our contributors are going to be exploring the use of blockchain outside of just art and culture. It's very interesting to see the use case of the blockchain that can be benefiting not just specific niche and group of people, but as you mentioned, just a more accessible and a more wide group of people.
I think my personal struggle is, I think curation is definitely a skill in itself, and it's very important. But one of the things that we try to do, aside like the inaccessibility, aspect of it, where people can't afford the gas fee and everything, I personally think sometimes curation can come off as a way of, of like blocking access, because if you're curating for a specific kind of people, but then there might be somebody who doesn't fit the aesthetic, but they maybe have the talent. Like, how do we navigate that? I think that's one of the things I personally struggle with. Like, someone might be doing a cool project, but something is kind of quite off. Do you mentor them until, they're, yeah, if you can share some thoughts on that.
I think it's a very complicated question that's ages old, and that was partially the reason why, for example, cultural institutions and art institutions existed. They were initially, the idea for them was to create the curation, and later they were growing into, more of a gatekeepers and abusing the power. But also without the curation, I don't think that, especially in the age of such crazy amount of information, it will be possible for anyone as a consumer to kind of navigate, whatever they want to bring their attention to and how they want to, split and divide their attention. So I do believe that both should exist. And then it's just up to a creator, however they want to, split their time and where do they think they have a better chances for success. But I don't think there's honestly an easy answer to this question. I also don't think that Web3 solves this. And I think it's just the matter of a creative finding their like perfect outlet.
I agree. Well said. I think the only thing I can see Web3 doing is just having that diversity in community. So you can just like find one and kind of join and kind of go from there and get the support. But yeah, well answered. That was good. Thank you. And so I guess my final question would be, if you had any advice for young entrepreneurs or creative directors who would kind of be interested in getting in this space, what would it be, and what like keeps you going? What keeps you going in Web3? Why haven't you quit?
I'll answer probably the first question first. Is I would say probably two things that I can speak just from my experience is the experiment mindset, be in a constant experimentation stage, was something that Web3 unlocked for me. And I, cannot recommend enough to get into the stage and challenge yourself to be constantly in the experimentation stage. It doesn't matter if you're a builder or if you're a creator, but just try new tools, try new techniques, try new people, try, new work frames, and don't be afraid to bring it out there, and don't be afraid of public opinion about your experiments. It doesn't matter. Just the experiment for the sake of the experiment will get you somewhere. The second piece of advice that I probably would have is just to join DAOs. There is an insane amount of DAOs right now that's probably can be found in the place where you're living, or the area of interest that you have, or the people who are like-minded to you. And you can join sometimes just as a member and be a part of the conversation, or even just the observer. Sometimes you can join and be the very proactive part of the team and like a core member. And there's no better way to just kind of learn from other people and be a part of a DAO. There will be ups and downs coming from that, but I think it's a part of the learning process. And in terms of what keeps me going, I think probably Web3 so far is the only place for me where I see that amount of aligned people and having, like-minded people and aligned in values. So I think that just people around me who are the dreamers, optimistic, sometimes they have their downs, but that's also okay. I do have my downs, but it's the people who just believe that we can do something better. And there is a sense of, collective care about each other, about the world, and building for each other. That what just keeps me going.
I love that. That's really well said. And really, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Very insightful. And I'm so glad that you are, one of the, I'd say, like leaders, in my eyes, like shaping the narrative, because Web3 is still young, as we say it. And so whatever we do today determines how it's gonna, evolve. Sorry. So thank you so much, Yana. Really insightful. And where can our community listening to you find you on your social platforms?
Twitter, obviously. And yeah, my Twitter handle is Yana Sosna. And then check out Zine.
Check out Zine, and we will have all the links in the description. And also thank you all for being a part of today's forum. If you want to get involved in our community, follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter is NEWFORUM_NCO, and we're NEWFORUM.io and NEWLive.io. And we will have all the links in the description. So thank you again, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you, Yana. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much.